Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May 18th, and I've got to put down the Simply Cheetos Puffs, the white cheddar Cheetos Puffs, because they're just too good. All right, here's what happened today in garden history. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of Tsar Nicholas, the last emperor of Russia, the king of Congress Poland, and the Grand Duke of Finland. He was born on this day, May 18th in 1868, and he ruled from November of 1894 until his abdication on March 15th of 1917. But on this day, May 18th, back in 1918, Nicholas was celebrating his 50th birthday, and he was essentially under house arrest by the Bolsheviks, along with the rest of his family, the Romanovs, in Yekaterinburg, the fourth largest city in Russia, and the entire family was holed up in a private home called Ipatiev, or the House of Special Purpose. And this birthday, his 50th birthday, would sadly be his last. Later on in June of that year, Nicholas wrote in his diary, "It was unbearable to sit that way, locked up and not be in a position to go out into the garden when you wanted and spend a fine evening outside." And around that same time in June, his wife Alexandra wrote, "Out in the garden, fearfully hot, sat under the bushes. They have given us half an hour more for being out. Heat, airlessness in the rooms intense." And by the 23rd of June, Alexandra noted the wonder of breathing in the fresh summer air whenever she got the chance. And she wrote, "Two of the soldiers came and took out one window in our room. Such joy, delicious air at last, and one window no longer whitewashed. The air in the room became clean, and by evening cool." Nicholas observed, "The fragrance from all the town's gardens is amazing." Well, this would be one of the family's last moments of happiness. On July 17th, 1918, the entire family, including their children and most faithful servants, were brought to the basement and executed. Today, there is nothing left of the Ipatiev house. It was demolished in September of 1977, and the land was given to the Russian Orthodox Church. The altar inside a church called the Church on the Blood is on the very spot where the Romanovs died. And the beautiful church honors Nicholas and his entire family, who are now regarded as saints in the Russian Orthodox Church. And it was on this day, May 18th in 1926, that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in his journal, "My garden is an honest place. Every tree and every vine are incapable of concealment until after 2 or 3 months, when they reveal exactly what sort of treatment they have had. The sower may mistake and sow his peas crookedly. The peas make no mistake, but come up and show his line." And today we celebrate the birthday of Winifred Georg Sebald, who went by Max, and he wrote as W.G. Sebald, the German writer and academic, and he was born on this day, May 18th in 1944. When Max died at 57, he was regarded as one of the greatest authors of his time. His 2001 novel, Austerlitz, was his final novel. The book was honored with the National Book Critics Circle Award, and in 2019, it ranked 5th on the Guardian's list of the 100 best books of the 21st century. Here's an excerpt. In the warmer months of the year, one or other of those nocturnal insects quite often strays indoors from the small garden behind my house. When I get up early in the morning, I find them clinging to the wall, motionless. I believe, said Austerlitz, they know they have lost their way, since if you do not put them out again carefully, they will stay where they are, never moving, until the last breath is out of their bodies. Indeed, they will remain in the place where they came to grief, even after death, held fast by the tiny claws that stiffened in their last agony until a draft of air detaches them and blows them into a dusty corner. Sometimes, seeing one of those moths that have met their end in my house, I wonder what kind of fear and pain they feel while they are lost. And today we remember the American educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, womanist, and civil rights activist, Mary McLeod Bethune, who died on this day, May 18th, in 1955. Mary was the 15th child and the first baby born free to her newly freed parents, who were enslaved before the Civil War, and in all that time before, they were owned by different masters. Mary's father, Samuel, had to work to buy his bride, and most of Mary's older brothers and sisters were sold to other masters. Mary was also the first person in her family to go to school. In 1904, Mary moved to Daytona, Florida, and there she created the Daytona Literary and Industrial School, and within 2 years, she had 250 students. Without means, Mary improvised and used sticks of charcoal for pencils, mashed elderberries for ink, and cardboard boxes for tables and chairs. Mary saved $15 in pennies, nickels, and dimes and put that money down on a swampy piece of land that served as a garbage dump. It was called Hell's Hole, and with the help of other benefactors, Mary built a 4-story building on the site. Over the main doors were the words, "Enter to learn," and looking up over the same doors upon leaving, students saw the words, "Depart to serve." Mary's school continued to grow until it finally merged with an all-boys school and became known as Bethune-Cookman College, or BCC for short. As the school's first president, Mary reflected, "When I walk through the campus with its stately palms and well-kept lawns and think back to the dump heap foundation, I rub my eyes and pinch myself, and I remember my childish visions in the cotton fields." Mary became a nationally known speaker, and she often spoke of a people garden, a place where people of all colors grew together in harmony. Now, initially, Mary was disheartened that there was no black blossom to represent her race and make her people's garden complete. But all that changed when she discovered black flowers in gardens during a visit to Europe. During her visit to Holland, Mary received black tulip bulbs, and after she saw a garden with black roses in Switzerland, she ordered 72 black roses for the grounds at BCC. The gesture earned Mary a nickname, the Black Rose, and in turn, Mary called her BCC students her Black Roses. It was on this day in 1955 that Mary died of a heart attack, and her will ended with this goodbye. "I leave you love, I leave you hope, I leave you racial dignity." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Medicinal Forest Handbook by Ann Stobart. This book came out in 2020, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. And the subtitle is Growing, Harvesting, and Using Healing Trees and Shrubs in a Temperate Climate. This book has tons of practical information on using medicinal trees and shrubs for your own self-sufficiency or for profit, and it's a fantastic book. Now, before I get into this review, you should know that Anne has tons of direct experience creating her own medicinal forest in England, and she regularly uses herbal medicine in her practice. Now, what's especially exciting about the way Anne has written this book is she is giving us advice for all kinds of users of medicinal plants, whether you're looking at small gardens or small properties, all the way up to agroforestry. There is so much in this book. Anne talks about medicinal trees, practical advice on how you incorporate those into your landscape, what kind of shrubs that you should be thinking about if you're interested in medicinal plants, how to combine woody and other layers of medicinal plants together so that it looks good and so that it makes sense with other projects that you may have on your property. And Anne also takes us on a deep dive of some of the main medicinal constituents of woody plants, and then also some of the latest research. And this is information that you don't always see together in one complete guide. Usually there are drips and drabs in other books, but what I love about what Anne has done is she's put it all together here. All the information that you need to make informed decisions about the medicinal trees and shrubs that you want to plant on your property. Now, Anne herself points out that many books on forest gardens focus primarily on food. And so to have a book that talks about medicinal forest gardens is especially unique and valuable. And so what Anne is doing here is sharing her wisdom when it comes to harvesting so that you can create your own herbal remedies. And here's what Anne wrote in the foreword to her book. I love herbs, and I'm especially passionate about medicinal trees and shrubs. This book is not only about how you can cultivate and harvest them, but it's also intended to provide you with the basis for creating your own medicinal planting design and herbal preparations. The medicinal forest garden provides a way to grow and harvest healing plants that draws on natural and sustainable processes to make efficient use of light, space, soil, and water. And in a world where we're still dealing with supply chain shortages and the climate crisis, what could be better than learning to promote health and biodiversity through planting more medicinal trees and shrubs on your property? And speaking for myself, I can say that I've had a few takeaways after reading Anne's book. I'm installing a mini orchard up at the cabin, and I'm also supplementing my old growth forest all around the border of my property. And I definitely took some of Anne's tree and shrub recommendations, and I'm incorporating them into my garden plan for this summer. Anyway, I love this whole field. I love this entire area of using plants not only for their ornamental or food value, but also for their medicinal value, which was a key driver for the early plant explorers as well. And so I love reclaiming some of that knowledge. This book is 288 pages of a ton of information. It's broken into two parts. Part one has detailed information on the medicinal applications that you can get from trees and shrubs, including how to design, grow, harvest, and create remedies. And then part two gives you a fabulous directory of 40 medicinal trees and shrubs. And I bet you anything, there will at least be a handful that you'll want to add to your garden in the future. You can get a copy of The Medicinal Forest Handbook by Anne Stobart and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $20. Great book. Finally, we end the show today with a story about the impact of a volcanic eruption on bees. It was on this day, May 18th, back in 1980, that Mount St. Helens erupted. Do you remember where you were when the volcano erupted? I do. I was in Mr. Emery's science class in junior high, and I remember talking about the eruption and its impact for many days after this day, back in 1980. And still today, the deadly eruption of Mount St. Helens triggered what would be the largest landslide ever recorded. Now, before I read this little excerpt, you need to know what a bee brood is. And in beekeeping, bee brood or brood refers to the eggs, larvae, and pupa of honeybees. And so when I came across an article that reported on the impact on bees and local apiaries, well, I could not resist sharing this little snippet from the Honey Market News. The true impact on honeybees from volcanic ash fallout will take a long time to assess. The Columbia Basin bees died within hours of ash fallout from the St. Helens eruption on May 18th. The second eruption on May 25th caused great stress in the hives in southwestern Washington. Brood was pushed out, and colonies with new queens introduced 1 or 2 days prior to the eruptions were killed. Central Washington bees took 3 to 4 days to die or remove brood from the hives. Bees were affected by ash collecting in their respiratory systems, resulting in suffocation or loss of moisture and eventually death. Beeswax cannot be used because of the abrasive ash residue that cannot be removed. And then the article ends this way with this little interesting detail, I thought. They wrote, bees avoided foraging on anything that was covered by ash fallout. Yet, they would go to any blossom that had opened since May 19th. Smart bees. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope you get to spend some time outside in your garden today. And if you do, think for a moment about the Romanoff family and how they savored every moment that they could spend in the garden. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of the Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.